Okay, so let's dive into one of history's greatest, and I mean greatest, disappearing acts, the missing tomb of Cleopatra. For centuries, we've basically treated it like a cold case, an accident of history. But what if it wasn't? What if the world's most famous queen made her own tomb vanish completely on purpose?
And that question right there, that's really the heart of it all. This wasn't just some monarch. We're talking about a woman who commanded armies, controlled immense wealth, and played the game of power better than almost anyone. The idea that she just somehow misplaced her own eternal legacy, it's not just unlikely, it's kind of insulting. And this just lays out how weird the whole situation is. Seriously, we found the tombs of provincial officials who were probably forgotten the day after they died. We've got resting places for minor nobles, but for Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, nothing. A complete and total blank space in the historical record. Which brings us to the core thesis here. The short answer is, she didn't misplace it. The disappearance of her tomb wasn't a mistake. It was the grand finale. Her entire life was a series of carefully staged performances, and this was her final act. So to really get how her tomb disappeared, we first have to get her. We have to understand the woman who would have planned it. Cleopatra didn't just stumble through life. She directed every single scene, and her final scene was no exception.
You have to remember, in ancient Egypt, a royal tomb wasn't just a place to put a body. It was an eternal branding campaign. It was a monument designed to scream across the centuries, I was important, and you will remember me forever. Cleopatra knew this. She would never have left her own legacy up to chance.
I mean, look at her final days. They were an absolute masterclass in narrative control. The Roman Emperor Octavian, he wanted to drag her through the streets of Rome in chains, a trophy. But nope, she robbed him of that moment. By planning this shared tomb with Mark Antony, she took a brutal military defeat and spun it into one of the greatest tragic love stories of all time. Okay, so if Cleopatra planned her burial so carefully, where did it go? Well, this leads us to our number one suspect, Rome. The Romans had a very, very powerful motive to make her tomb disappear. Frankly, they were terrified of her memory. For Octavian, think about it, a huge, grand tomb for Cleopatra right in the middle of Alexandria would have been a public relations disaster. It would have instantly become a shrine, a pilgrimage site, a symbol of everything that wasn't Roman. The last thing he needed was a monument reminding people of the queen he just conquered. So what do? You can't just go in and smash it to bits. That's way too noisy. That kind of loud destruction just creates a martyr. Instead, Rome chose a much smarter path, and this quote sums it up perfectly. Quiet erasure creates footnotes. And here's how they probably did it. It wasn't about dynamite. It was about bureaucracy. You just seal the tomb, you restrict all access, you stop mentioning it in any official records, and then you just wait. Let time and neglect do the heavy lifting. When a figure this famous vanishes from history, trust me, it's not an accident. It's policy. But Rome wasn't the only force at play here. Cleopatra's own capital city, the amazing, glittering Alexandria, turned out to be a very powerful and very unpredictable accomplice in hiding its own secrets. And yeah, it's almost like the city itself decided to get in on the action. The very ground Cleopatra ruled over became this unstable accomplice. Between earthquakes and a sinking coastline, Alexandria basically conspired to bury its own past, making it the perfect partner in crime for anyone trying to hide a tomb forever. The physical reality today is just mind-boggling. We know the city was hit by major earthquakes. We know that huge chunks of the ancient royal quarters, almost certainly where her tomb was, are now literally at the bottom of the sea. And to top it all off, the modern city is built right on top of the old one. It's not like you can just start digging under an apartment complex because you've got a hunch. So, this leaves everyone looking for it with this incredibly frustrating question. Is her tomb buried under a coffee shop? Is it covered by centuries of silt? Or is it just sitting there, peacefully, under the waves of the Mediterranean? Any one of us could have walked or sailed right over it and had absolutely no idea.
But there's a third theory, and this one is pretty tantalizing. What if the tomb isn't lost at all? What if it's exactly where Cleopatra wanted it to be? Hidden not by force, not by nature,
but by faith. Now, this is absolutely key to understanding her. Cleopatra didn't just worship the goddess Isis. She went around telling people she was Isis, reborn on Earth. So for a living goddess, a standard royal tomb just wouldn't cut it. Her final resting place had to be somewhere that cemented that divine identity for all time. And that line of thinking, that divine logic, leads archaeologists to one place in particular, Tapa Saris Magna. It's an ancient temple complex dedicated to Isis. It was sacred, it was symbolic, and its location just outside the city? Well, that made it the perfect spot, close enough for her followers to reach, but just inconvenient enough for Roman bureaucrats to ignore. And the things they've found there, oh man, it's so close to being a smoking gun, but not quite. They found coins with her face on them. They've discovered these deep, secret underground tunnels. They've unearthed statues that look a heck of a lot like royal figures. It's all incredibly suggestive, but so far, no giant sign that says, "Here lies Cleopatra." So after all these theories, Rome's quiet erasure, a sinking city, a sacred hiding spot, we're left with a much bigger question. Why does this still matter? Why, after 2,000 years, are we still so obsessed with finding this one tomb? Well, it matters because almost everything we think we know about Cleopatra was written by the men who beat her. It was Roman propaganda. Her tomb, if we found it, is our only real chance to hear her side of the story, to see the final chapter as she wrote it on her own terms. But then, again, there's this one last thought, and it kind of flips this whole thing on its head. Finding the tomb would put a neat little bow on her story. It would lock it in, turn her into a solved problem, an artifact in a museum. And if there's one thing we know about Cleopatra, it's that she was never, ever interested in being a closed book. So, what if the mystery is the point? What if this vanishing act, this endless search, is her true final victory? A final defiant performance that ensures she remains forever uncaptured. Rome never got her in that parade. History never got her grave. And in the end, maybe that means she remains forever unconquered.